Good day there, it's Christopher Morgan in Melbourne, Australia. I'm suffering from a serious life-threatening systemic fungal infection in Melbourne, Australia. For 5 years I've been fighting to receive some sort of help from specialists and pathology labs. I've uncovered an enormous number of problems as to why I'm not being treated and refuse treatment, and also the pathology labs are not seeing what the infection is because they never report yeasts. There's lots of problems. I mainly want to give you these images because I have a horticultural background of 40 years. I was trained at a horticultural college to use a microscope, and I've used it extensively for studying fungi and insects. Only when the pathology labs kept reporting there was nothing in my sputum that was mycotic, we knew that was wrong, of course, and so back in 2018, I think it was, I realised I had to start doing my own investigations, and what I've uncovered is very serious and very important. In a nutshell, I use KOH, highly alkaline. I treat specimens, and this is systemic. I have proof here that shows it clearly in the skin from skin punch biopsies, 3 of them, all reported from pathology labs that there was nothing there. It's in the sinuses, the urine, the blood, the lungs. It's right through the body now, and I have essentially meningitis symptoms. So I'll go through and show you these images because you must use KOH. They won't use that here in the labs in Melbourne, and they will simply never report yeasts in any sputum sample because it's commensal. 2 doctors demanded they report yeast. 2 of my GPs demanded, not the specialists, they're not interested. But 2 GPs demanded, and the labs refused to follow the doctor's instructions, which could have saved my life by now, simply by identifying the yeasts and understanding which ones match my images, and then possibly receiving correct medication. I'll go straight into it because these images you won't find anywhere on the internet. It's taken me 5 years to put these together. I pray that they help save a life because I'm being left untreated and I'm very close to dying. Right, these are the sort of things I was coughing up once we started treatment with voriconazole. Now, there's my email. I'd love any support from anybody. I only want opinions. That's all. I realise you can't diagnose this. But I'll show you this evidence, and this is what has to change. I'm going to try to deal with the authorities here in Australia because there are serious problems in the pathology labs and in the medical profession. That's generally a description of what's going on. Won't bother reading it. I had to go to universities. A professor came from a local university to watch my microscopy preparation because a specialist told me I must be contaminating all my slides. It couldn't exist in my lung. A GP also came and did the same thing for me. Both wonderful people. I got massive support from 4 universities, 100 times better than any specialists I saw, other than one who was the first specialist was very helpful. But the pathology report said there was no mycotic elements after we did a bronchoscopy, and that was when this whole merry-go-round began, because I couldn't comprehend how that could happen, because I'm coughing it up all the time, as you'll see. A letter from my GP explaining exactly what he's given me and the fact that we were in big trouble finding help. These are some of the pathology reports showing fungi in the lung. I'll skip through them quickly. There's enough there to show that obviously I'm searching for this and we're trying to get evidence, but they never report yeasts. A wonderful person from a university identified a couple of penicillium and an unidentified white filamentous, which we now think is geotrichum. This is the independent labs I've had to employ. I've gone through my entire life savings of $200,000 in 5 years because of the medical profession and the pathology labs not performing their tasks adequately. Now this is a geotrichum. They found a geotrichopsis and they found something in the blood, Leptosphaerium maculans. I've been around that in my horticultural career. Lots of potting mixes, compost, diseased plants with fungi that I've treated for years, decades, including dead trees killed by fungi. They said, you've definitely got fungi in the blood. I said, I know, I can feel it in the brain. But it may not be this genus and species, but it's definitely there. All urine, blood, and biopsies show no mycotic elements from the mainstream labs. A couple of penicilliums, some mucors, that's in urine. This is the wood fungi. Pardon me, that's the fungus in the lung, or the yeast in the lung. There's wood fungi reported. I had to send samples to the United States to prove that there's mycotoxins at high levels in the body. They're the sort of things my GP's tried to give me to help save my life over the last 5 years. The voriconazole was the first one I received from him after 6 months of waiting for a report from a pathology lab on sputum samples. They mentioned Aspergillus fumigatus might be there, so he could then legally go ahead and try to treat it. It didn't work initially, but at 600 milligrams, by the time we got to that, it was really breaking up the fungus and the yeast, but then it stopped working, and we had to stop taking it as liver markers were increasing, and it didn't beat the infection. They're the sort of things I have to take to keep alive every day, natural things, inhalations. They're the symptoms. It's essentially meningitis now, full blown. These are the important images. This is what's coughing up from the lung after we tried the first antifungal to shift the infection in the lungs. These came up 3 months after the voriconazole reached into the higher levels. We were on 6 weeks, we were on 100 milligrams. It did nothing, absolutely nothing, didn't touch it. Symptoms remained the same, the wooziness, the sort of meningitis, sort of underlying pain, stiff neck, all the rest of it, mental impairment. But once we went to 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 milligrams, stepping it up gradually, then it started loosening, and up it came. The problem we got here is I've shown this to a specialist here in Melbourne, highly regarded at one of our major hospitals. He has a microbiology background. He looked at this and said he had no idea what that was. I'm a horticultural background. I knew they looked like yeast. You can see the circular elements that just simply straight away stood out to me as yeast. He didn't say that. He didn't mention that. He took it to the lab. They looked at it and they said, we don't know what it is either. He then decided that I must be contaminating all my slides. And that's why I had to go and get actual people to come to my house to verify I'm not doing that. What astounds me is that he wasn't willing to investigate something that was very unusual. I was very ill, and he simply wouldn't follow that up. I find that quite inadequate. So that's what I was coughing up. And you can see here the different forms, but the thing about this here, they look like arthroconidia chains from a geotrichum hypha, which has been found in sputum, which I've grown. So here we are, these odd elements. Odd-looking cluster, but once you look at arthroconidia, which I'll show you in a moment, it makes perfect sense that could be one of the fungi. You'll be totally gobsmacked by these images I've got of what's in my body now. It's gone ballistic, the yeast and fungi. So that's in September 18. Now, I know yeast's involved, and it could be the major neurotoxic element because it's in the skin and everywhere now, and I've got evidence of that. There are cell-in-cells, very clear, from this particular yeast. The salmon pink colour, of course, is typical of a rhodotorula. No one would identify it in the labs, of course. They won't identify yeast in sputum. So we've got big trouble. Even when the doctors ask and demand, they report them, they refuse. Again, you've got a pinkish sort of growth colony, and you've got cell in cell. Now, I do a lot of sensitivity testing on naturals because that's the only thing I can do is spend all my money on natural to try to not pass away at the moment. But it's reaching a mass which is poisoning the brain beyond my ability to stay in the body. Now, this is from the sinuses. This came out in 2019. I was actually using ammonia to wash a small bathroom, and I felt something completely dislodge out of the sinuses. I didn't know what it was at the time. It was only later on when I saw more of this in the body samples that I had to keep doing because the labs were not doing them properly, that I realised that is rhodotorula. And that is a dead ringer, or rhodotorula. There it is from the sinus. Now that's a punch biopsy in the chest in 2021. I've had 3 done, and very clearly that mass is exactly that mass. You can see the concentric rings here on the starch cells as they are here in the rhodotorula images, along with these indented cells as well. There it is again in the punch biopsy. It's just a mass of it. That's in the chest. The whole chest is itchy. Nobody has recorded that in the 3 biopsies we've been given to the pathology labs. They say there are no mycotic elements. The punch biopsy I'm given is right next to the one they're given. 3 times I've found it. 3 times they've said there's nothing there. Big problems. That's in the urine. Punch biopsy June 2021. July 2021, and look what's in the urine. I have a systemic deadly infection. No one's helping me in the mainstream pathology and specialists in Melbourne. That's 20 specialists, 5 years, $200,000. Urine, there it is. Urine, September 4th, 22, there it is. Urine, July 11, 23. That's why I've got so many images, because you can see the dates. It's constant. I'm constantly ill, fighting for my life. If I can find this, why can't they? Urine, of course, fungi there. That's in August 22. Skin outbreak in the forehead. We know it's right through the skin now. We know it. It's everywhere. You can see the concentric rings here. Same stuff. There it is again, the cell in cells and the skin forehead outbreak. This was another outbreak. I was using essential oils at the time to try to attack it with other natural elements, and they'd work for a while and expose some of the infection, and then they'd run out of legs. This was a ridged sort of rash. I managed to, of course, sterilise it with alcohol, and then this is what was growing in the skin layers. As we can see quite clearly, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Here's some hypha being produced, and it's just the same thing. There it is. There's the cell in cell. These you'll see in biopsies. Beautiful images coming up. Again, just a massive infection in my skin. The whole body now is a mass of yeast producing massive neurotoxic loads on the brain. There are some montages of what's in the skin on that rash. That's the skin rash. That's undoubtedly a penicillium, of course. Not uncommon. I've been around a lot of rotten oranges covered in blue molds, penicilliums. Now this colony though was unusual. It was a funny looking colony, cream, and this is what I managed to get from it. It was quite interesting, because we know wood fungi's been spotted in sputum, and we know everything's systemic at the moment, whatever it is, and these do look a bit like Ganoderma spore, and I'll show you those in the blood in a moment. That is a yeast infection. That's a yeast sort of outbreak on another part of the torso that came out, and I'll show you those again. There's the biopsy of 2021 June. That mass was in the biopsy. It's undoubtedly yeast, and again, not mentioned by the laboratory that tested their sample. There they are again. There they are again. These blow out into massive hypha production and masses of yeast, which I will show you in a moment. Punch biopsy again. Once you use KOH, which they don't use in labs here, they have to use it because that's the way they're going to identify such a massive, deadly yeast infection that's systemic and kills the body. It really incites hypha production, KOH, with this particular type of yeast. There you can see it there going ballistic. There's plenty of it. That's from the punch biopsy from the skin. It's a very unrecognisable mass of yeast, and that's part of the problem. They're probably looking for university cliched photos of a yeast cell and candida or Saccharomyces or something, but it's not like that. This yeast is really, really mutated. Now this is from the chest biopsy, the latest one, the third one, done just a week ago. I had my sample, the other was sent to the lab, and the first report we've had back from the lab is that there are no mycotic elements in the sample whatsoever, and they were definitely told they must report all yeast. They have to. They wouldn't have tested that with KOH. I'm not allowed to talk to them, and that's the way it works. This is what they would have seen without KOH. They wouldn't have even seen that, because that's KOH beginning to develop the yeast growth. They would have seen these discs, and they wouldn't, well, they obviously did not report them. There's nothing there. They would have seen plenty of these. I'll show you. That's what they look like before KOH. I treat it with KOH 10%, and that's what happens within 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. It just blasts out all the hypha and various yeast growths. This is how they begin to develop. Initially, they're just a circular disc, which they don't understand what it is. They don't report it. It's obviously yeast, but they did not report it. They didn't treat it with KOH. So this starts to blow out, blows out here further. Again, these will blow out in this sort of more smooth-looking surface, whereas some will develop into these more granular outer edges. It'll continue to blast out with the KOH working. You'll get these very thick hyphas coming out. You'll get thin hyphas coming out. Again, it'll begin to sort of disintegrate and expand into this sort of mass of yeast growing until finally it begins to really, really unwind and develop into this mass of conglomerate of just really really weird looking sort of lumps and clumps with eye fur, until finally you end up with this. And that's the problem. I'm copying up all of those from sputum. That's in biopsy, but they're also in sputum. It's a systemic infection and it's being missed, and I'm doing this to try to save someone's life. I have been treated so poorly, it is shocking. Anyway, that's the way it is, so I'll do my best to get this out to people who are really interested to save people's lives with serious systemic infections of fungi or yeast, because these are important and you won't get them from any pathology lab in Melbourne, Australia, that's for sure. Again, here's the infection blasting away under KOH. They can do it as small circular chlamydospores. Under KOH, they'll just end up going ballistic. Same here, you can see the hypha production and yeast production. KOH, this is from the chest. Now, they would have looked at this, well, they wouldn't have perhaps seen that because they don't treat it with KOH. But even if they see that in my lung sputum, they will dismiss that as contaminant or artifact or something. They just won't. They'll never report it because they don't understand what they're looking at. We all make mistakes, but it's costing me my life. KOH 10%, again, you can see how it just sends it into ballistic reproduction. There they are there from the biopsy. Here's just at two different depths of field here. You can see clearly here that's how it begins inside the circular disc, which is one right here, which they could easily mistake for an air bubble as well. It's not. It is this. It's the yeast. These are the same. This is the same element, just at different depths of field, and you can clearly see all the hypha with KOH. You must use KOH. My infection is deadly, and I'm fighting for my life now. And without proper help, I expect I won't beat it any day now. That's one solid mass from the chest. The whole chest is itchy. I've been told there's nothing there from the microscopy experts at the pathology lab looking for mycology. These are very common, cough them up and sputum quite a lot. Very distinctive, clear cell-like structures, and this is in the biopsy. That is the same thing, but just a large disc of it. Now this is the biopsy showing all the infection through it, which they said isn't there. And this is the same company, unfortunately. I thought I'd give them another go, just give them a chance, you know, to correct their mistake. This was from 2019, and they reported with this biopsy, there are no mycotic elements there at all. In their defence, though, I will say that the GP sent this in formalin. Only afterwards, when I asked him what did you put it in, by the way, formalin, I said, no, you mustn't put it in formalin. That will destroy the yeast and fungi. However, there's so much in it that it's unlikely it would have destroyed it, and they would have done a biopsy fairly quickly, I imagine. And they didn't see any of this, apparently. That's from the chest biopsy. That's all fungal reproduction, masses of it under KOH reproduction. That's with no KOH, and you can clearly see it there from my biopsy. There's masses of it. It's all through the biopsy, all through it. They've reported they saw nothing. If they saw that, most likely they'd think that that is some sort of contaminant, unknown, and also you must remember pathology labs in Melbourne, if they don't know what it is, they will not report it. Doesn't matter how much is there. They won't report it because they're concerned that they'll be seen as being incompetent. So the specialist should be notified there's something here, there's a lot of it, we're not sure what it is, it needs further investigation from people more experienced than us. They will never say that, never. Again, this is a disgrace. Never mind, there it is again with just a wet mount, a lump of yeast again from the chest, same stuff. Now this is the early one, in the first one we had done in 2019, and as you can see here, they're the same elements, the cell in cell, cell in cell. Even I knew these looked like yeast. There it is, there it is, there it is, there it is. There's the cell in cell, a very nice clear image, and there's nothing there according to the pathology lab that did that. There's just a wet mount, and clearly it's there. This is the sputum from February the 9th, this one. So this is just 1 week ago when I managed to cough up a small sample, and sure enough, it's very hard for me to get those samples now. I'm lucky if I get 2 in 6 months. These are the yeast cells. They don't understand what they're looking at. Now this is sputum treated with KOH from just last week, and again you can see they're going ballistic. This would have been a nice disc, spherical disc, And if that was when they have been sent, they've been sent constantly for 5 years to all different pathology labs around the place. They've never, ever reported this, ever once. There's the problem. We can die from bacterial infections that are systemic, and you can die from yeast infections that are systemic. They just don't get it. Never mind. There it is again in the sputum last week. Large chlamydospore straight out of the lung. This is wet mount, KOH. Again, another large chlamydospore from the fungal infection. This is how fast they grow. That was about 5 minutes later. You can see the bubbling effect of the yeast very quickly within about 5 minutes. It's really ballistic, this yeast. There's the biopsy, and there's the sputum coughing up. They form these large chlamydospores. They go into these granular formations. This would have been a nice smooth circular disc. It ends up like this. There they are again. This is from sputum, just coughed straight up, wet mounts. Again, same thing just last week. Well, just a couple of days ago. Yesterday. Yesterday, I'm saying. I'm in so much pain all the time, I'm forgetting where I am. Blob of yeast just from yesterday, coughed up straight out of the lung. Here's sputum with KOH. You must use KOH. If someone's suspected of a serious, life-threatening yeast infection that's systemic, KOH must be used. It can stimulate certain yeast to go into massive hypha production, and that will clarify what the illness and the disease that's killing the patient. It will clarify it. I have to do all this work because they're not doing it. There's the hypha production. This is so viscous now that even just sitting there with gravity, it won't move. There is a classic example of the amount of yeast in my lung. It's not commensal, as I've been trying. Specialists tell me there's nothing in your lung. I beg to differ. I'm extremely ill, fighting for my life, being poisoned by something which is in the lung and now in the flesh. It's been 5 years I've been waiting for help. Masses of it there. It's KOH sputum, September the 30th. You can see here just what KOH does to this mass from the lung, deep in the lung. Masses of it there. Again, you've got these really free-flowing forms. It's probably a mutation by now. 5 years I've been attacking with everything I possibly could that's natural, and it's managed to just prevent me from dying, but unfortunately it's overpowering the brain there. There's some hypha there, of course, and that's again sputum, September 30th, 22, KOH. This is KOH. These are some lovely images here, 27 of them, just to show you every 15 minutes. And this is how fast the hypha can grow from the yeast that's flooding my body everywhere. They blow out into all these various sort of free-flowing forms. They look like hypha maybe at some of the times, and then they just blow out into these free-flowing forms, which again would be why they're looking for classic yeast cells or classic yeast hypha. This is not one of those. There it is from KOH sputum. There's September, masses of infection, masses of infection. August, masses of infection. September again, masses of infection. Geotrichum from the web, multiple different forms. This is very similar to what I'm coughing up. We know there's multiple problems, multiple fungi or yeast involved in my illness. The immune system's just being totally overwhelmed now and it can't cope anymore. This is from agar that I've grown. I assure you I'm very careful with molds. I've been around them my whole working life. I know how dangerous they are. Now these are the arthroconidia. That clump of arthroconidia, throw in a few extra ones, that's a fairly uniform branch. That one, I've got others that are far more varied. But you can imagine the circular, the elongated. So I cough up a clump of this without the hypha, although I've coughed them up as well from times. And this is what they're seeing. They are seeing a conglomerate here of the arthroconidia. They don't know what they are. They haven't got the evidence that I've got. They're not doing the work that I'm doing, partly because pathology labs simply can't spend the time doing it. I understand that. But I'm being treated very badly. When the specialist saw this, as I say, he didn't know what it was. The lab didn't know what it was, so therefore I must be contaminating my slides. As you can see already, that's just impossible by all this evidence. There's a typical sputum sample full of yeast. There's my geotrichum, so I'm very careful with these. I grow these outside in a room out of the house, and when I change them, I have a respirator, a mask on, etc. And they're only up in very small amount of time to transfer onto a slide, water, etc. And they're disposed of carefully. There's the arthroconidia from the geotrichum, and that looks like pretty much one of the problems. There's some change from it again. You can see the different sizes here. This is a classic example, elongated, already bending a bit there. There's a more circular one here, different sizes here, and that's what they're seeing. They're not seeing the hypha. I've seen them occasionally, but mostly they're seeing the arthroconidia, and they don't know what they are. There's some arthroconidia, geotrichum candidum, and there's the cell in cell, which is seen throughout my whole body. This is from my agar plate. This is from sputum coughed out of the lung. You can even see here it's segmented already into arthroconidia chains. It's a dead ringer. There's more of the chains, of course, from the arthroconidia. That's November 21. I'm ill every single day. There's masses of this in the body, and I'm being unfortunately poisoned beyond the ability to stay alive. Masses of fungal yeast elements, November 20, November 19, the same elements, 22. The dates are jumping around simply because I'm trying to group them so you can see the consistency of what I'm fighting every day. These are a bit like encapsulated cryptococcus sort of things, but I'm not sure what they are, but they're hanging around with the lung, in the sputum. More of the same images, November 19, November 19, September 19, they're part of the fungal infection, micro, macro. Same thing, an ocean of infection. That's not commensal. There's a detail of the cell in cell. November 19, same things. That's put in brain heart infusion. I use simple methods and try to be consistent. I have over 12,000 images now from 5 years investigating my own illness. Hypha coughed up straight from the lung. These are unusual. I've coughed them up from time to time. They seem to grow into chlamydospore chains. Possible sporidium with spores coming out, November. Another yeast. I'm always checking the yeast because I'm certain that's probably involved. A yeast, a sporangium. Again, these loose forms that break apart. Thick cell wall from sputum. Same thing, sort of moving from the infection into various forms, very loose, free-flowing yeast forms. Or another detail of the infection, multi sort of cell walled structures. A mass of the infection, very free-flowing fluid sort of forms. Again, micro to macro of the infection, same thing. That's January 2020. That may be a blow-in. That's sort of like a fusarium or trichophyton. But this is present all the time. There it is developing the outlets for the spores. And here's one actually releasing spores. Now that's from sputum, January. Now that is wet mount, straight out of the lung at 1,000 magnification. Here's the cell in cell that we're seeing everywhere. Now this is sputum January the 16th, 2020 in brain heart infusion, and it grew, of course, the same thing. Sporangium straight out of the lung. Here's one of the sort of loose chlamydospores breaking apart. Even if it's an immune cell, the immune cell can't hold the infection. This, as soon as I coughed these up over some years, I thought they looked like wood fungi. The semicircular aspect, it just looks so much like a lichen or fungi or wood fungi. These are semicircular. I've cut a lot of dead wood. This is in the blood, taken from the vein by a professional, given to me. This is in broth for 28 days, and here we can see the skin rash 1, which I found, and here's the one from the blood, and here are the Ganoderma type wood fungi. I've chosen that wood fungi because they weren't certain what wood fungi is in the sputum. They just knew it was wood fungi. But this could be a real winner, or a loser, whichever way you look at it. Here you can see the flat edge. You can see the circular ridge, etc. around the edge. And that's in the blood. And the first test I had from the independent lab saying you've got fungi in your blood, they are correct. The sporocarp is in the urine and the blood, again grown after 28 days in brain heart infusion. These started coming up 2022. I now believe, after 5 years of trying to piece this together, these are yeast growths. I thought there might have been some sort of weird oxalate or cast, but I think now they're yeast. Now these are coming out of the lung deep in the bronchioles. And they are really ballistic, as is the whole infection there. That is from deep in the bronchioles. I have trouble breathing. I've told specialists all of that, and they said there's nothing in your lungs. 20 specialists and pathology labs. Although they have reported fungi, but specialists won't do anything about it. From the lungs, sputum, that's in the urine. It's a systemic infection. Urine again, it's a systemic infection. Urine again, October the 3rd. When was this one? October the 3rd. That was September the 4th, 22. There you go. A year later, it's the same thing. Oh no, not a year, sorry, a month. A month late. Oh dear. Okay. Infection, micro to macro. Sputum, January 2020. January 15, 2020, a sputum sample, masses of hypha. Again, the fungal elements are in here too, these sort of yeast elements. It's a real mixture now. These are coming up. They're possibly like a glomus chlamydospore. They're deep in the lung, and they're associated with all the really yeast-looking wood fungi type elements. Again, coming up here in July 23. 2020 in February, the same thing's breaking apart. Similar type of possible fungal chlamydospore or sporangium. These are masses of these coming and going deep in the lung. This is from deep in the lung, thick-ridged samples, 2020, 2022 and 2023. It's the same thing, it's still there. And they're associated with these discs and this sort of granular contents, which seem to be one of the most serious fungal infections in the body. Macro to micro, sputum, same sort of thing in the sputum again. Same thing, here's one that's still compact, here's one that's simply breaking apart. Massive infection, March 20, April 20, April 20. These started to look like mycorrhizal when I started seeing these. There's a mycorrhizal spore, and I've been around a lot of wet soils and plants, repotted plants with wet roots, etc. Mycorrhizal, of course, are in a symbiotic relationship with roots of plants, and maybe it is just a really unfortunate rare thing, but no one's investigating it properly. May 2020, more of the same. Infection, this is a mucor that I grew, and this is and also reported by labs from sputum. They grew it as well, and this is coughed up straight out of sputum. Massive circular yeast clusters, typical of what I'm coughing up all the time. June 2020, July 2020, a massive infection, 2020, 2020 July, 2020 July, 2020 July. KOH, the 16th of July, a mass of yeast infection in my body and lungs there. Chlamydospores that have loosed their contents. Again, the thick cell walls, always associated with these granular surroundings. These are associated with these sort of chlamydospores. This is the yeast, which has grown there on the agar plate, and here's the cell in cell. Here's the here's more yeast. I do a lot of testing on natural antifungals to try to help my body. Hypha coughed up straight out of the lung. More of the infection. Masses of it, October 2020, hypha, October 2020, October 2020 hypha. I'm putting these images just to show this is a relentless illness, and I'm ill every single day, being untreated. This is just the evidence. That's all. Cell in cell. It's not being reported by pathology labs or recorded. November 2020, here we have these really difficult and strange looking sort of chlamydospore type wood fungi cluster things. Massive infection, November 2020, infection 2020. Again, you can see that sometimes they're thick-walled cells. Here's a clear cell-in-cell definition. Again, more of the chlamydospore breaking apart. Same things, November 2020. Here's a sporangium, undoubtedly still connected to the store. That's straight out of the lung. Here's this unusual encapsulated element. No one reports that. Another yeast with obviously the same infection still there. January 2021. Same things coming up from deep in the lung. January 21, a younger sort of grouping, slightly more mature, fully mature, and that'll fall apart. Masses of it in the lung sputum. They are not immune cells, and if they are anyway, they can't contain the infection. Straight out of the lung, hypha with spores. January 21, January 21, January 21, 23rd of January. Here's this beautiful image of what I've grown on agar, which is undoubtedly some form of Geotrichum species, most likely. And there is what came straight out of the lung onto the slide. It was already growing in the lung. These are already developing hypha in the lung. And this one here is also growing hypha in the lung. That's straight out of the lung, straight onto the slide. The specialists have told me there's nothing in my lung. I just stick the container jar in the incubators. I've got 2 incubators running at 2 different temperatures to look for dimorphic fungi, and all I have to do is just sit it there and pull it out in 2 or 4 days, and there's oceans of things growing. Typical of what I'd cough up virtually any time over the last 5 years. Again, the infection, a very long hypha, unidentifiable. This almost looks like a distorted penicillium on the end here. Masses of infection, February 21, February 21. Again, typical of what I've been giving to the labs for 5 years, coughing it up from the lung. It's infected. Those bubbles, of course, I know they can be caused by bacteria, I think at times, but we all know yeast certainly can cause it. And so if this is full of yeast, which we know it is, it would be reasonable to conclude that's the yeast. Again, that's the same sort of sample with the same yeast products growing in my lung. The infection, I use oils as well to test. They're brilliant. Oregano, cinnamon, I've used them to try to beat the infection, but they can't beat it either by themselves. Plus I've got to watch the biome. I've got to be so careful. I take so many different things now, the immune system's struggling. They're all natural though, because specialists refuse to acknowledge I'm ill, or that there's anything in the lung. Again, here we go. These are all associated with the chlamydospore. So these circular discs are associated with this. So they're one and the same fungal genus and species, whatever they are. March 21, March 21, they're in biopsies as well, everywhere. There's a chlamydospore that's emptied the contents, one breaking apart, another different form, March 21, March 21, March 21, masses of infection. These are the more loosely sort of forming yeast structures. Same here, you can see these sort of weird shapes that they develop. It's a very free-flowing sort of mutation now after 5 years of not being treated properly. March 25th, 21, 27th, 21, 27th, there's a hypha. They've discovered this in sputum samples in the labs, and I've also grown it at some mucor. Now the thing is, put in brain heart infusion broth, which they won't do of course, you can get this chlamydospore chain production from that mucor sample, agar sample. Now, I could be coughing these up. This could be there going into this production. They don't see this, the chain that I've grown, because they don't do it. They just see one of these discs, and again, they don't understand what they're looking at, if they see it. Here's one from the agar plate, and here's one I've coughed up straight from the lung. It's very degraded, of course, but it's also very, very similar. More of the infection, 21. More of the infection grown on some agar. There's a lump of the yeast or geotrichum yeast, whatever it may be. Again, the same thing here. This could be the young geotrichum chains. Now, I showed this to one of the top fungal specialists in Melbourne, and I said, they refused to help me and told me to go and see a psychiatrist. I said, what about this image here? I'm coughing this up all the time. For years I've been coughing this up for the last 2 years. And that person said to me, that's not an infection, that's just inflammation. You have nothing in your lungs. That is what I grew from that specimen. The fungal specialist told me there is nothing in it that's infective. That is what I'm battling. It's unbelievable. Sputum, and there it is, just then sit in a container for 4 days, and that's what you got. Massive infection, November 21, November 21. November the 8th, 21, another sample, and the same stuff is there. Of course, it hasn't gone anywhere. That's it there now. They form microspore reproduction. Oh, there we go. There's another chlamydospore. Here's a stomach skin eruption, and of course we've got the cell in cell. It's the same systemic infection. That's yeast, a thin mass of yeast. Here we can see these hypha, yeast-type hypha coming out of the yeast mass. Not reported by anyone in any biopsies or in anything. Again, you can see the mass here. That is a block of yeast growing in the subcutaneous tissue, poisoning the brain now. Again, the same infection, masses of it. This was an unusual one on a plate that came up, but unfortunately I have seen things like these cells. They're thick-walled cells and their structures, and I have coughed up these. I can't find all the images. I've got 12,000 now, and I'm in too much pain now. It's a bit like constant meningitis. Even while I'm doing this, I've got a lot of head pain. but these are thick-walled cells, and again, no one's recording them. Massive infection in 2022, infection 2022 May, this time, chlamydospores surrounded by all of these. This is a very interesting one from deep in the lung. This is straight out of the lung, surrounded by these elements that are connected to those wood-like fungi chlamydospores. And look at this. That is really up the pathway of a glomosporocarp. I mean, that really is. There's no doubt about it. It's quite potentially a wood fungi that's involved, along with perhaps another thing, bound to be other things, but that could be the killer. One of them is certainly neurotoxic to the brain, I can tell you that much. I don't need a specialist to tell me that. I can feel it. So here we go, May 22, more chlamydospores. You can see the elements forming here. I've got some wonderful image of these in a minute. Being formed. Here are the elements again, breaking apart. May 22, May 27th, 22. The same fungal elements associated with these sort of things. Another high for fungal elements. Just another geotrichum type, Arthroconidia, grown from another sample in June 22. I just check every now and then. These are these Cryptococcus type elements, but they're, again, unreported. This is from sputum. This whole mass is the infection, that whole mass. And this is growing in the mass. And this is the same as what we saw in the biopsy from a week ago, February the 2nd. And this would blow out into massive yeast production if it was in a slightly different setting than this mass. Probable infection, there it is again in June 28th, 2022. Sputum 22, July 22, July 22, July 22, July the 8th, 22, July the 8th, 22, left in a jar for 4 days, and bingo, there it is. But it's also this mass here is the problem as well, and that whole image is full of the infection. Again, easy to grow, just put the sterile collection jar in an incubator and there it is. But that's a mass of the infection. July 8th, 22, masses of it still. July the 8th, 22, more of it there. More of it at 22. July the 18th, 22, straight out of the lung. Surrounded by these granular aspects which are to do with these chlamydospores. It all fits in. There's a gigantium type of fungal element. They are, some of them very large, these sort of, whatever these fungi are, and that's deep in the lung, which I can't get out anymore. It's really hard. A massive infection, a hypha, more of the thick-ridged elements, thick-ridged element, July 22, massive infection, hypha, July 24, 22, mass, that's all infection, that whole image. Same here, that's August 22, August 22, August 22. Another hypha, August 22, August 22, August 22, August 22, that's the infection there, forming these colonies and masses. A spent chlamydospore, another hypha, look at that example, straight out of the lung. Another chlamydospore that's loosened its contents. This is coming from deep in the lung as well. It's a bit of a worry. This definitely looks like a wood fungi that I've seen at a macro size. I've definitely seen that shape in the past. Over a 40-year career, I can't remember where I've seen it. It's on obviously some sort of rotten wood somewhere that I've seen it. Anyway, this is from the lung. So again, fungal elements, hypha from the lung, the infection from the lungs, August 22. Again, you've got all these granular aspects that have come away from this chlamydospore when that's fallen apart. This is the worrying one. This is grown on agar from sputum in August the 30th, 22. I know I've seen this somewhere in my history of doing gardening and horticultural work, somewhere on some rotten wood. I know I've seen this at a macro level, but that's micro. And that's, unfortunately, it was on agar. That base colony is a filamentous colony, but this was in amongst it. And I imagine this came up with the sputum sample and just happened to be there. Unfortunately, that is part of the problem. Long hypha, probable sort of sporangia, encapsulated element that no one reports or identifies. More probable fungal elements. Fluvastatin is very good at, this was a mucor I think I tested here, and I try everything. We tried fluvastatin, again a small amount of gain, but it wouldn't be enough to remove the infection. I'm still heavily poisoned. Agar into broth, and lo and behold, of course, these develop. A mass of, this is just a mass of infection in the lung, a solid mass. Same here, straight from the lung. I can feel it. There it is again, there it is again. Now these specialists are telling me there's nothing in the lung, and that's the problem. Pathology labs are not doing their work properly. Again, here we've got these elements coming up from deep in the lung, very thick yeast-like blobs. Massive infection, same thing. A singular element, but you can see these multi-celled walls here. It's a very fluid sort of thing. Here's just another, I just checked, well, what's growing in the lung now? This one here could be the yeast. I don't test all of these, I just check to see what's going on. Many of the time I've sent a sample in, the same sample that I put on a plate like this and grown this, and they've replied nothing there, nothing grown. Oh dear, okay. Okay, fungal elements, we're at September 22, moving ahead now quickly. Just masses of infection. They form these large colonies. Here's a hypha growing. These are the sort of chlamydospore type yeast elements growing out of it. Same thing here. Same thing here, same thing here, same thing here. A mat, look at that. That's not commensal. This is 2022. Years of this, days, every day, every day. Now this one I should have kept. I didn't get all these pieces of the puzzle together until like recently, and I've been very ill the whole time, so it's been hard. Sometimes I can't do any research for months, I'm so ill. Now this is what they grew. There are some sort of budding forms up here. You can see the sort of microspores coming out of these perhaps yeast cells, but they're also forming these like starch cells. And what's interesting about this is, of course, they end up forming similar starch cells to the rototorula that we saw earlier, particularly these ones, and this one in particular. And yet some still remain as micro sort of spore reproduction. So this could be it. There's your rototorula, and there, of course, your indentations, etc., on some of these starch cells. And this could be the one that's ballistic in the body now. There's just a close-up of concentric rings from a sputum sample, one of these starch elements. I often cough up these, the beginning point down to, normally I don't see this is from the agar plate, normally it's cut off here. There in the lung. Undoubtedly that could be the yeast growing into these long, smooth sort of blocks. Hypha straight from the lung, September 22. These may be sort of, you know, we're seeing, there may be crystals, oxalates possibly, but they're sort of around the time I've gone deeper into the lung and started coughing up those chlamydospores and all the associated elements. These also appear, so it seems to be connected to those very deep-seated possible wood fungi, whatever it is, red fungi. Straight from the lung, straight from the lung. Oxalates, plenty times. Of course, oxalates we know can be associated heavily with lots of fungi growth. Sputum infection, a massive infection from deep in the lungs with these thick ridged elements. That's why it's so hard to cough this up now. Again, a sputum, that's just a wet mount straight out of the lung, micro to macro. September 22, just left in a jar, elements just powering away everywhere. Same infection, hypha from a sputum left in a jar for 5 days. Same elements growing and breaking apart, masses of them here in September the 10th, 22. Another yeast, just looking at them. Here's an encapsulated that I coughed up. Here's one that appeared on an agar plate. Here's another one of these unidentified aspects, elements growing. Sputum, sputum. I see these from time to time. Undoubtedly they look pretty fungal to me, but no one ever acknowledges they're there. Here are these thick-walled elements from deep in the lung, which seems to be a real serious problem, unfortunately. More fungal elements. Fungal elements, again, this is September, left in a jar, and here we can see the starch-like cells here, and this granular mass, which is unfortunately now everywhere. Again, this could be a block of yeast growing. There's the concentric circled elements. This is a mass from September 11th, 22 in a jar for 7 days, but I'd say this mass would have been there if I'd have put it straight on the microscope. I doubt it grew in the jar. It was growing in the lung. A big mass of it there, a real solid block. No wonder I can't cough it up anymore. That's lining the bronchioles. You can see the singular elements and how much is there. And it's almost impossible for me to get this up now. Fungal elements, there's some more there. more there, September 22. Now this is really interesting. These ones are really rare. This seems to be, the chlamydospores seem to be forming, you can see the shape here taking place, from this growing point. It almost looks like it's coming from a foot there, like a fern, which has developed a foot, then a frond. I don't know if it's coming from this piece of yeast here, or whatever it may, fungi, but it certainly seems to be a growing point. And then it grows up, and out come these forming of the individual elements. This is another one in the same mass. Again, a growing point, growing out, and you can see them all forming. It's quite an amazing image, and you won't find that on the internet. I'm the patient who's very ill. I have microscopy ability, and this is why you're seeing them, because I've been doing this for 5 years non-stop to try to get evidence, to get someone to help me. I've failed so far. There it is, growing, and you can see already this is beginning to take the shape of the mature chlamydospore, and there you have it. So that, I think, is one of the morphologies it's using to develop these chlamydospores. It's quite interesting. Deadly, but interesting. Again, surrounded by this mass of sort of lipid-type yeast-like spheres. There's another, that's from sputum, so that'll be a kinetophore stalk sort of thing. Again, this is the sputum, masses of these interlaced chlamydospore type structures like a wood fungi, and it's just a mass of it. No wonder I can't cough it up, and no wonder I'm extremely ill, suffering brain poisoning, which is what's happening right now while I'm talking to you. Masses of yeast, it's just left in a jar. There's the conglomerate, and there's the one that I had the image of, which seems to be growing out of this point, but then they eventually formed these. Now that, I defy you to find that anywhere on the internet. That will be difficult to find. And, but I'm happy to share it, because it could save someone's life. However, no one is paying attention. I hope someone will. Masses of infection, or a small infection element, another one there bursting forth. Now this is just December 2023. Now there it is. I've been coughing this up for the last 4 years. Never once reported by any professional pathology lab in Melbourne. It's not good enough. There's the chlamydospores. They're easy to see, and they're clearly fungal, and they're clearly possibly neurotoxic to the brain if this is the one that's affecting the brain. No one will do a spinal tap. My GP said I needed one 4 years ago. 20 specialists refused, despite the meningitis symptoms. How do you account for that? There we go here, another again, massive infection, thick-walled. This is all December 23, just a couple of months ago. It's the same stuff. There it is again, I believe these are possibly the yeast morphology, just going into these yeast blocks, is what I think they are. You can see they're associated with these same sort of granular fungi contents of the chlamydospores that we're seeing like tortoise shells. They're very associated, so I think these are actually made up of these, and I've seen these break apart into segments, and so I think that's what's happening here. You can almost see the segments here forming, and I think that's what's happening. It's just part of the morphology. That's from the lung. Straight up out of the lung, September 2022. Same there in urine, it's systemic. Sputum, and now in the blood. This is from the vein, taken by a professional, and I know from the independent lab they say you've got it in the blood. I know. I said there's the micro-macro infection in the blood in January 2020, and I'm still suffering meningitis symptoms every day. Fighting with everything I can to not die, but it is, unfortunately, that is my body, to not die. My spirit is another matter, but the body is unfortunately close to collapsing. There they are in the blood. Again, you've got this microspore production. That's in the blood. Iodine stain, that's blood, straight onto the slide, and there is the infection in the blood. It's not a coincidence. It's not the contamination. It's ongoing. It's endless. I would appreciate someone in Melbourne particularly taking this more seriously and urgently working with me to find out what this is before I die. My body, that is, not my spirit. There's the infection there in blood, brain heart broth. brain heart broth again is sporocarp, which tends to look a little bit like these mycorrhizal. This is paraglymus. Now that does look very suspiciously like, doesn't it? Doesn't that look like the very things I'm coughing up from deep in the lung? This could be a rare mycorrhizal infection in a human being. The specialists say, they've said, that's rare. It couldn't be that. Where's the logic? If every time this comes up, a specialist says that's rare, it couldn't be that, it'll never be reported, and that's why it's rare. The logic is not existing. I am amazed at about my humour under such circumstances. It's a serious matter. Sporocarp in the blood. There's the blood again. We've got this sputum. Now that's sputum in brain heart broth. This is the blood. Brain heart broth. It's the same thing. There it is, micro, macro, blood. Brain heart broth, masses of it. It's a systemic infection. Blood again. Now this is interesting. This is exactly the same as the February the 2nd biopsy that I did with KOH. Here, of course, it's just been in, I left the tube. I've just put the tube in the incubator. And that's what happened. But you can see here that the yeast discs are beginning to blow out. You can see here the transformation taking place on this one in particular. And that's what we saw earlier in the biopsy from the flesh. Now this is some really dramatic images that I thought I'd add as well. I've got 12,000 images. I'm too ill to go through them now, so I just try to grab a number to prove to you that this is happening. This is not some sort of, contaminant. Okay, January the 1st, 2021, masses of this. This was a really good sample, really hard to cough up, and there they are. Surrounded by all these same elements, granular, these discs, golden discs on my colour microscopy work, but there's masses of this deep in the lung. Never reported. These would have been seen by microbiologists in sputum samples because I checked the sample as well as they had the same sample I had. In other words, I took a bit of the sample out and tested it, examined it microscopically, and I saw these things, and they would always report nothing, or maybe an occasional aspergillus. Well, that's not aspergillus, that's for sure. If they don't know what it is, they don't report it. That's the problem. So we've got a problem here. Now there it is en masse. There's a beautiful shot of the internal elements growing. There it is, masses of it associated with those chlamydospores. Again, a very odd looking wood fungi type element. Masses of the infection. Chlamydospores, same thing, same mass infection, just chlamydospore groupings, enormous amounts of them just reproducing deep in the lung, poisoning the brain. If that's the neurotoxic one of them is certainly extremely neurotoxic, or maybe in the spinal fluid, but no one will do a spinal tap. So there you go. I'm stuck with it. There it is, and there are the contents. Very granular. I originally started calling these a field of debris when I had no idea I didn't have the connections until the years went by and I saw more and more images of the same repetition. Then I realised what was going on. So there we go. And again, they kept saying nothing there, nothing there. So they were wrong. There's a massive infection. That's straight out of the lung. The lung. Now these are interesting. This is KOH. Now these actually start to be showing signs of these circular elements on the surface, which really can match these. I've got better images of these that look exactly like this sort of bridging structure around the surface. But you can see it here. You can see the circular structures here and this bridging here. You can see that. You can see it there. Now that could be another morphology of this, the way it's growing, or it could be a different species again. That's the problem. It's quite complicated after 5 years now. It's really become difficult. There's just some of the reports, of course, from people who tried to help me, just declaring this guy is sane. He does good work. Please listen to him, and they are thrown in the rubbish bin by a specialist. Now, anyone can contact me in any way at all. I don't want a diagnosis. I just want support. It'd be just wonderful to have anybody support me. Now, I'm not going to read through these, but these are the recommendations I'll be giving to the Australian government regarding what's going wrong in the medical profession here in Australia, particularly in Melbourne. There are really serious problems with in the culture, very serious problems with pathology labs not reporting yeast, doctors not being listened to when they ask for a report for something that could be a life-threatening infection. They're being denied that report result from the pathology labs. That is a disgrace. So I'm going to be giving this to the government and to other governing bodies and try to bring about some change. And the universities also need to really, I don't know what they're teaching these people who become doctors, but they need to perhaps reassess what they're doing. So that's where we are. All I can say is I pray that someone will use this to save a life. If you're in a pathology lab, if you're a microbiologist, I've got 12,000 images. Email me. I'll give you as many as you want. Use them. Use them in classes at university. Anybody use these. These are being missed. You must use KOH. For this sort of deadly infection, which I am about to die of if I don't receive some sort of help. I'm in agony every single day. I can barely walk now. Agony all night and all day. So I'm trying to put this together in case I do pass away shortly. And at least I pray to God that someone will take an interest, a serious interest in this, and realise that what I've said is logical, and you can't dispute this sort of microscopy work of 5 years. You just simply can't do it. Yes, I'm not a registered, licensed human pathology microbiologist. Okay. My images speak for themselves. 40 years of horticultural career, taught to use a microscope 40 years ago correctly at a college. It's worth something, isn't it? You would think. I, of course, forgive everyone who's misdiagnosed me here in Melbourne and left me to die in agony. I forgive you. And I mean that. I really forgive you. The pathology labs are not giving you the correct reports. They're falling down on the job. But the pathologists and the specialists are all, unfortunately, refusing to investigate this correctly. I pray that these images will bring about a change in that. If not for me, if I pass away, well, okay, bad luck. But this will be left on the YouTube for others to hopefully find. And I will be sending this, of course, to the links to various people in the medical profession so that they can be aware of what's going on here in Melbourne, Australia. And this needs to be altered. Rules need to change. KOH has to be used at times in necessary suspected serious systemic fungal infections, particularly involving yeast. Anyway, I offer this up. That's all I can do. I'm in agony. It's taken me a big effort to get this together because I'm in so much pain I'm nearly passing out. In fact, I collapsed on the kitchen floor 3 nights ago. The poison levels in the brain were so massive I simply collapsed onto the floor. Didn't even know I was falling till I hit the floor. There you go. 5 years. But I'm just a gardener, what do I know? May the divine loving creator bless us all and help us to love one another. That's the main thing, and do our best to help one another. And look at the truth. We've got to put aside our egos and say, blimey, well, you can't deny that. We've got to look at this. That's the sort of thing I need. Someone that's just interested in their work and puts aside egos, and I'm a gardener, so what? There's the evidence, there's the truth. Look for the truth. And there it is. So I pray this reaches somebody somewhere in the world and you will help to save a life by this and alter the pathology in microbiology testing in pathology labs needs to be altered. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. I'll try to get it changed in Australia and Melbourne. I'm the patient and I have been told very clearly by the specialists, I am worth nothing. I have no power. I'll just do what I'm told and that's it. That's what they've made extremely clear to me, and I unfortunately have to contest that because I am not going to be treated like that by these people. There we go. That's my little soapbox for the day. I'm trying to help them. Wake up. Okay. Have a good day. Bye. God bless everyone. Where are we? There we are.